welcome to our deep dive. Into the world of relationship literacy. You've sent us some really interesting stuff, like excerpts from A Journey Through Grief, and also that relationship literacy manual for the modern clergy. And we're really excited to sort of see how this whole idea works, especially in different religious settings. One thing that really caught my eye, though, was that the manual covers all kinds of religious figures, pastors, purohits. It's pretty diverse.
Yeah, sounds like you're curious about how this relationship literacy thing might actually work differently, across these roles. I mean, they definitely each come with their own challenges, right, and expectations.
Exactly. Before we dive into the specifics, though, I think it's really important that we define what we're actually talking about. When we say relationship literacy, what does that even mean based on what we've read?
So the manual actually defines it as, well, a combination of skills and knowledge. And it's all about building and maintaining healthy relationships, really. The big emphasis is on things like respect, empathy, open communication, and understanding how to resolve conflict. Now, here's the thing. It's not just about avoiding negative stuff. It's about going a step further and creating an environment that's actually positive and supportive,
Yeah, it's not just about putting out fires. It's like building strong connections right from the start. And one thing I found really interesting was that this manual, it's specifically for religious leaders of all faiths. It seems like they're going for this universal approach to building these skills.
Yeah, and that suggests, right, that these principles are relevant no matter their religious context. It's like they're giving leaders tools that they can adapt to their specific communities. Right. You know what I mean? To meet the needs of their congregations.
There's this one section in the manual, it really jumped out at me. Yeah. It talks about how relationship literacy, it's not just about preventing abuse, but it's about actively fostering respect and honor. I'm curious, how would you say that plays out in practice? Especially in a religious setting?
Well, it's about creating a culture where everyone feels safe, heard, and their value is recognized. It means encouraging open communication. So disagreements can be addressed, but respectfully, and also giving individuals the power to express, their needs and boundaries. The manual gives a really good example, actually, of this church that started a mentorship program. So they paired experienced members with newcomers. It was designed to create deeper connections and also a more inclusive environment.
I'm curious about how this whole concept of relationship literacy, how it applies to the different religious roles that the manual outlines. Is there a common thread that ties these roles together?
Despite all the different faiths and practices, all of these roles involve a really deep level of, interpersonal engagements. They're spiritual guides, moral compasses, and often they kind of act as relationship navigators for their communities. Just think about what they do: counseling, mediating conflicts, and simply being, positive examples for their congregations. All of that requires a deep understanding of relationships.
It's like clergy members, no matter their title. They're dealing with so much more than just rituals and sermons. They're navigating this whole web of relationships within their community.
Right, and the manual is really clear about this. It's not just communication and empathy that matter. It's also understanding the cultural nuances. What works in one place might not work somewhere else. You can't have a one-size-fits-all approach in these diverse settings.
Speaking of different roles, I have to admit, I'm really intrigued by this purohita role. I'm not super familiar with it, to be honest. Could you maybe shed some light on that for me and our listener?
Sure. So the purohita holds a really vital role in Hindu traditions. They conduct Vedic rituals, offer spiritual guidance, and they officiate those life cycle ceremonies like births, weddings, funerals. They're essentially the keepers of ancient wisdom, right? And they help people navigate these sacred transitions.
Their work is so closely tied to the emotional lives of their community. I imagine it takes a lot of sensitivity and understanding.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Purohitas need to be able to understand the needs and perspectives of those they serve. It's diverse. They're dealing with the emotional weight of these rituals, the hopes, fears, It's delicate navigating sensitive situations with both compassion and wisdom.
Okay, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about chaplains. They have this unique position, right? Working in secular environments with people from all walks of life.
Yeah, the thing about chaplains is their adaptability. I mean, they have to build trust and rapport, whether someone's religious or not. Imagine that, navigating a hospital or a military unit, high-stress environments with people from totally different backgrounds. It takes a special set of skills to be effective there.
So for them, relationship literacy is all about building bridges, right? creating those connections, regardless of individual beliefs.
And it's not just individual connections. The manual actually talks about how chaplains help foster a sense of community within institutions, creating environments that are inclusive and supportive.
Interesting. From what I recall, the manual goes into a lot of detail about the roles of pastors and ministers. That makes sense, I guess. Those are probably the most recognizable religious roles.
Yeah.
Can you give us a rundown of what the manual emphasizes for these roles, specifically in terms of relationship literacy?
Yeah, so it outlines their core responsibilities first.
Yeah.
Spiritual leadership, rituals, counseling, community building. The interesting part is it doesn't just stop at listing duties. It digs into the how. The specific skills and mindset needed to be effective.
So it's not just going through the motions. It's about having the right approach and understanding the nuances of human interaction, right?
Yeah, and that's where emotional intelligence is so important. The manual really stresses that pastors and ministers, they need strong communication skills, a high level of empathy, and a commitment to constantly learning, growing, because it's a dynamic field, requires constant adaptation.
It's interesting, right? As we're talking about all this, like you think about how the manual, it emphasizes this proactive approach. It's not just reacting to problems, It's about actually creating environments where healthy relationships can happen.
Yeah, it's a shift, isn't it? From damage control to cultivating relationships. So instead of just dealing with issues when they blow up, you're establishing this foundation of respect and empathy and open communication right from the start.
Okay, but how would that look in real life? Say a pastor wants to do this. What are some actual steps they could take?
Well, the manual has some good examples. They could organize, like workshops, on things like active listening or nonviolent communication, or encourage small groups where people can connect more deeply. It's about giving the whole community the skills to navigate relationships in a healthy way.
So it's not just the leaders then. It's about empowering everyone.
Exactly. The manual makes it clear that relationship literacy, it's not just for clergy,
Right.
It's for everyone. You want to foster this culture of respect and empathy that reaches the whole community.
That makes sense. I mean, a religious community,
Yeah.
it's made up of individuals, right?
Yeah.
Interacting in all of these different ways, not just a church or temple, but in their everyday life.
Absolutely. It affects how people interact, how conflicts are resolved, how parents raise their kids. It all falls under that umbrella of relationship literacy.
Yeah, it's like weaving these principles into the very fabric of the community, making healthy relationships a core value.
The goal is to create a space where people feel safe, supported, empowered to connect in meaningful ways.
We've talked about abuse prevention, right? It's a recurring theme in the manual, and it's definitely been in the news a lot. I'm curious, how does the manual approach this issue?
One thing that stands out is it doesn't just list the different types of abuse, it goes deeper. Looks at the root causes, the dynamics of power and control that often lead to these harmful behaviors.
So it's not just don't do this, it's trying to get people to understand why abuse happens in the first place.
Exactly. It's about prevention, not just punishment. The idea is to create a culture where abuse is less likely to happen to begin with.
And how does relationship literacy fit into that?
Well, think about it. If you have a community where people are good at communicating, attuned to each other's needs, and where boundaries are respected, it creates this environment where abuse is less likely to take root.
Like building up a kind of immunity to abuse at the community level.
I like that analogy. It's not that abuse becomes impossible, but the community is better equipped to recognize it, address it, prevent it from escalating.
Okay, so we've talked about the what and the why, but what about the how? Does the manual give specific advice on how to actually develop these skills?
That's where the practical stuff comes in. The manual has a bunch of suggestions. For individuals, it stresses self-awareness, active listening, learning to express your needs and boundaries clearly, assertively.
Right, because if you don't understand your own emotions and communication patterns, it's tough to build healthy relationships.
It all starts with that internal work. But the manual also emphasizes community support, creating spaces for dialogue, workshops, training programs, even setting clear policies that promote respectful interactions.
It's multi-pronged then. Individuals working on their own skills, while the community provides support and structures.
Exactly. It's holistic. Recognizing that relationship literacy, it's not a destination. It's a journey of learning, practice, and growth.
You mentioned earlier that the manual touches on applying this in business settings. I'm curious about that. What parallels did you see between religious communities and workplaces?
I was surprised by how much it emphasized the benefits of relationship literacy in the workplace. Things like increased productivity, less conflict, better morale.
So it's not just about a nice work environment. It's about being more effective and successful.
Right. The manual argues that healthy relationships aren't a luxury at work. They're essential for success.
Okay, so what specific skills does it recommend for businesses? Are they similar to what we've been talking about?
There's a lot of overlap. Clear communication, active listening, conflict resolution, giving and receiving feedback. Well, it's all in there.
I can see how those would be valuable in any team setting, really.
Absolutely. The manual even talks about emotional intelligence and cultural sensitivity, especially with today's diverse teams.
Sounds like relationship literacy is a pretty valuable asset no matter what you do.
That's a key takeaway here. It's not some niche skill set. It's a fundamental human competency that can make our lives better, personally and professionally.
Speaking of personal experiences, I'm thinking about that excerpt from A Journey Through Grief. It really showed how damaging it can be when there's a lack of relationship literacy, especially within a family. It was a powerful reminder that this stuff matters.
That story really brought it home, didn't it? These aren't just abstract concepts. They affect real people's lives, the quality of our connections.
It showed that relationship literacy isn't just about avoiding bad outcomes. It's about fostering belonging, understanding, support.
Which are all crucial for individuals to thrive in their families and communities.
Did any particular example from the manual stick with you?
Yeah, there was this case study about a synagogue. They were having all these internal conflicts. So they did these workshops on communication and conflict resolution. And it was amazing, the transformation. It wasn't just about fixing the disagreements. It was about creating this more harmonious and supportive community. That one really resonated with me because it showed how powerful these principles can be for healing and bringing people together.
It's a beautiful example. Shows how these skills can have a ripple effect.
Exactly. Impacting not just individuals, but the whole social fabric.
You know, we've talked about a lot in this deep dive, exploring, all these different sides of relationship literacy, and especially in religious communities, but also beyond. I think it's important, though, to bring it back to the listener. So how can they actually use these insights in their own lives, even if they're not like a leader or anything?
Yeah, that's a great point. And the manual actually does have some really practical advice for developing these skills, no matter who you are or what you do. One of the most important things is self-awareness. It encourages people to look at how they communicate, understand their own emotional triggers, and learn to express their needs and boundaries in a way that's assertive but not aggressive.
It makes sense, right? Like, if you don't even understand yourself, it's hard to build healthy relationships with anyone else.
It really is. It's like relationship literacy. It's this ongoing journey of personal growth and self-discovery.
Earlier, you mentioned that the manual has these case studies that show how relationship literacy actually works, in real life. Can you share one that really stuck with you?
There's one that I've found really inspiring. It's about this mosque. They started a program to empower women within their community. They had workshops on leadership, communication, assertiveness, creating this space for women to develop their voices and contribute more.
They were really trying to make it a more inclusive and equitable environment, huh? What happened? What was the outcome?
The results were amazing. Not only did the women feel more confident, more empowered, but the whole mosque benefited, from their participation and leadership. It's such a great example of how you can use relationship literacy to create social change, to build more just and equitable communities.
That's a powerful story. It really shows that these skills, they're not just about helping individuals. They can help create change on a bigger scale.
Exactly. It's not just about individual well-being. It's about building healthier and more harmonious communities.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into relationship literacy, what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from all of this?
For me, it boils down to this relationship literacy. It's a skill set, but it's also a mindset, and it can make our lives so much richer. It's about being intentional in how we interact with empathy and a commitment to understanding each other.
Those qualities are important for everyone, really, not just religious leaders.
Totally. Whether it's family, work, or communities, these skills can help us navigate all the complicated parts of being human with more compassion, more understanding.
We've explored so much today, from that relationship literacy manual and those personal stories from A Journey Through Grief. It's been a really insightful conversation, and I hope it's giving you, the listener, some new tools, to strengthen your own relationships and to navigate the world with more empathy and understanding. If you want to keep exploring this topic, by the way, send us more sources. We'd love to do more deep dives. Until then, keep learning, keep connecting, and keep diving deep.